Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back to another episode of the Nyc Griff Show. Today is Saturday, April 2nd. It is 9:19 a.m. Griff, how was your week? Before we jump into the market check, how was your week, man?
Long one. That's
Long
for
one, huh?
sure. How was your week?
It was pretty good. Got some good stuff tied up, finished up, sent off, and looking forward to another good week next week.
So I do outside sales. My car payment situation has changed. So now they're giving us like a fixed payment plus variable. And the variable is like cents per mile and it's based on gas. But now I pay for the gas. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do better or worse. But I have to pay attention to gas prices even more now. But I already was. It's just crazy. So that was fun.
What are gas prices up at in
$6.
Sacramento? $6?
Yeah, I mean, like I saw one for $5.49 yesterday. What a deal! $5.49, killer.
That's crazy. It was here in Tulsa. It's been the last time that I was really like taking pictures of my my gas pump every time I was filling up. We went from like 350, I think it was like 359 up to 379, and now it's sitting back around the 360s. So what are we gonna do, you know? All right, let's jump into this market check. Griff, we had kind of an interesting week here, past couple of days in Bitcoin as far as our price for sure. But let's check out the S&P 500 this past week.
What's that for the year?
Let's see, year to date, falling off a little bit here. Currently sitting at 45.45. Let's check out look at that, dude. Isn't that crazy? Look at that fall off. I mean, you have the peak just before COVID, you know, in beginning of 2020 in February, falls due to COVID, all the uncertainty in the market, falls, let's see, from right around 3,300 to 2,300. It's 1,000-point jump or drop. That's a pretty significant drop there. And then there you go. There's QE. Jerome Powell and the boys getting the printing machine out, right? Okay, so that's the S&P there over the past 5 years. You know, you can kind of see the COVID outlook, the jump since then, all that kind of stuff, and obviously the big fall off that we're seeing here just recently. Let's check out the VIX here. Do you know how the VIX works, Griff?
It's like a volatility index. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's somehow or another, they call it the fear index. You know, they I don't know exactly how they use or how they measure the VIX and how they track it, how they find the data points every day, but it's supposed to show some level of certainty or uncertainty. So whenever the VIX is down, that means fear is down. When the VIX is high, it means fear is high. So if we look back at, you know, if we look at that 5-year jump, so here's COVID right here. There's that huge spike in the fear index, and we've kind of had some, you know, ups and downs since then. But Dow Jones, I imagine, looks pretty similar here. Let's look at the 1 week, up and down. And last but not least, we got Bitcoin. Look, dude, this was awesome. So here is, let's see. So here's Thursday, right? The 31st. And then Friday happens. Now we're in Friday. We have this huge fall off. All the direct deposits hit. I got to buy somewhere around in here in the middle of the night, right? And then it shot right back up afterwards. I was like, hey, can't beat that. But then, you know, looking over the past month, it's been kind of fun to watch the price of it go back up a little bit, hitting some all-time highs and within the past 3 months, right? But then obviously we've fallen off from the top up at 69 up there, I think was the top. But man, what do you think about this stuff, Griff?
One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. But and I think, like I say every week, it's a really important concept to understand because I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. You know, one Bitcoin is always going to be one Bitcoin within the Bitcoin network. It'll never be over or undervalued from that. It's always going to be worth one Bitcoin. And it's really, as an investor, what you're deciding is one, if there were only, let's just say that if there were only 21 million US dollars total, 21 million, they could be divided into cents, whatever, but there's only 21 million. How valuable would those dollars be? How cheap would everything be? I mean, to get a dollar would be crazy.
100%. So I haven't gotten a chance to tell you yet. Janae and I hit a pretty exciting milestone. So when we initially had started buying Bitcoin, the price was at 57,000 or so. That was a big old drink of water that you just took. We initially started buying at 57,000, I think, in October of 21, and then it jumped up to 69,000, and it's slowly fallen off since then. Well, we have continued to buy. We've dollar cost averaged our way in, and we have officially broken even, and we're positive now on our Bitcoin investment all time. And the price has never gone back above that initial buy price. I was like, hey, that's really cool. Gotta love the power of dollar cost averaging, right?
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, I think it's the best way to do it, and just try to be as heavy-handed as possible at the dips. I mean, but you know, what is one Bitcoin going to be worth? I think it's really hard to quantify for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's a long-term hold. I mean, really, we're talking about the scarcest asset on the planet that could potentially also be the medium of exchange. Okay, I'm just going to hold on to that. Why? Because I'll probably be able to buy a lot with it. People are going to take it. I paid my rent yesterday and spun my Bitcoin wheel, Nick. 4% back, 157,000 sats.
Really?
Uh-huh.
So what are you using to do that? Because you're using some type of Fold, you said, right?
Fold, yeah, it's a debit card setup, but
So
paid
do
my
you
rent with
you have to
it.
preload that, you said, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's like a preloaded debit card. That's kind of just how it works.
So do you have some amount like direct deposited there, or
Yeah.
do you have does your employer use like an app, like a service that has an app where you can easily change that stuff? Because I know that we use
Yeah,
that and it's super
ADP.
nice. Yeah.
ADP.
So
Yeah.
we use a service, and I can just hop on my phone. I can add in like my emergency fund account. I can add my regular account that I use with Chase. And then I've got Strike in there. So I direct deposit straight to Strike, and that spot buys. So you have it set up like that with Fold?
Fold, Strike, and Sierra's bank account, because I don't hold a traditional bank account anymore.
Oh, wow.
I hate it, man. Overdraft fees, hassles. I'm good. Don't need, and also you just like don't need it, because you can go to an ATM even if you don't belong to the bank anyway. And if we're talking about a bank run event, I don't know. Here's a good question. If there was ever a bank run again in the United States, which would be crazy because we know all the dollars are digital, but if there was a bank run again, what does that mean? What's going on? Like I'd be so confused. And what are people going to do when they realize only like 10% of their dollars are still in that bank? It's going to
Well,
be
here's something to kind of think about. And you were kind of moving into it, right? Like back in the day, a bank run was everybody's going to the bank and they're saying, give me my cash, or, I want my gold or whatever, right? Or, give me my cash probably is the main thing, right? Give me crisp $100 bills, because I don't want my money here anymore, right? It's interesting because a lot of this stuff, the vast majority of it is all digital dollars. I mean, not digital dollars in the sense of cryptocurrency. It's not the same style, right? But it is like, it's digital, it's online, it's just numbers on the screen. The dollars, it's dollar signs on the assets in the liabilities for these major banks. If you run to the bank and everybody says, hey, we're going to pull out our cash because the dollar's worth nothing, well, then we're just getting physical dollars that are still worth nothing. So it's like there is what does a bank run mean today? You know,
I know, I was thinking the same thing.
strange.
I think maybe bank runs are kind of impossible because the dollar really like inflates at an infinite rate, at any rate.
Well, it'd be weird to think, you know, how can you pull value out of something that can't leave that system? It'd be like you know, hey, we've got this is what it sounds like to me. I don't know, maybe this is incorrect, but if I'm the bank and I hold all the people's money, right? We'll make it super simple. I hold all the people's money, and for some reason or another, everybody wants to pull their money out because there's a lot of uncertainty. They're scared about what the future looks like, right? Let's call it inflation. Maybe it's inflation that's causing this. So everybody says, you know what, I'm pulling my money out of the bank. But the only way to use that money is to operate within the system that the banks operate within. So if you pull your money out of the bank, are you really pulling it out of the system? I mean, it's all part of the system, right? I mean, you could like gold is separate from this, right? Because gold is not connected to the dollar. Gold's value is not connected to the dollar. Similar to the way that Bitcoin's value is not connected to the dollar. We price it, right? We might price it in the dollar because that's what our most regular and commonly accepted medium of exchange is right now. But if it's a bank run situation and you're pulling cash out of the bank, are you really pulling your value away from that? Right? That is so weird. Hey guys, the topic today is inflation. We are kind of starting off getting into the weeds of some of these theoreticals and stuff here, but we're talking about inflation today. I don't know that a ton of people really understand exactly what inflation is, why it's caused. There's actually a couple of different main types of inflation. But let's hop right into this sucker. Griff, I got to ask your opinion before we get to the technical definitions. How do you think people view inflation? What do you think the common person sees inflation as, and how do you view inflation?
I think most people look at inflation up until, well, now, kind of. I think most people viewed it as nothing to worry about, in a sense. Like literally, like they didn't know what to think about it because a lot of these economic theories, you know, don't interest people, so they don't study it. So not a lot of people are finance brained like that. So, you know, they look at inflation and they were told by the government, hey, inflation's supposed to uh, basically represent growth in our economy. You have to invest to beat inflation, yada, yada, yada. It's like forced growth, which hasn't really been much of a problem in the United States because we have grown at a really, really fast rate. But if we don't beat our rate of inflation as an economy, you know, I mean, it's not good. So I think just inflation's legalized counterfeiting. I mean,
Here's a couple of key points here that we found on Investopedia, which if you guys are not on Investopedia, researching terms and ideas and, you know, economic strategies and Bitcoin, money, investments, all that kind of stuff, go check it out. I mean, Investopedia's got a hell of a resource. But anyways, listen to this here. Inflation is the decline of purchasing power over a time period, right? It's the decline in purchasing power. It's the decline in the amount of goods and services you're able to buy with your money, right? That's what inflation is. Typically, we see it in the CPI, right? What things cost. And we see it as not a decline in our purchasing power. We see it as an increase in cost for goods, which is really a little deceptive in my mind. Another piece here that it says is that it can also be a difficult and complex process to identify your exact inflation rate, because we don't all use the same products and services. This is the idea that inflation is relative, right? They use the CPI to track kind of the general consumer price index. It's very general.
That was a really nice way of putting it.
Well, I mean, like it is accurate. The CPI is exactly accurate if you buy only those goods and services within the CPI. But we know that that's not true. We know that
also the way that they calculate rent, housing prices, things of that nature is very off. I can't think of their exact calculation right now, but if we deep dove the way that they calculate, what the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment is in the United States and what's that is doing year over year, their calculation's off, way off. Because that's a big part of the formula, and they're saying it's 7.9%. It's not accurate. They have a way of fudging it.
100%. I agree with you here. So, what it says here is ultimately inflation leads to a decline in living standards and economic activity, which is a big piece here. And it redistributes wealth away from the lower income earners and to the owners of appreciating assets. So, that really is so wild. Like think about inflate. Okay, before we get too much further, right? We got to talk about a couple of different types of inflation. So there is cost push inflation, and then there is what is it? Demand pull. Is that the other one? Let me check out my notes here. So it's let's see. Yeah, cost push and cost push and demand pull inflation. So cost push is let's see here. Cost push is when the cost of raw materials, the labor that go into creating a project or a product are increased, and the cost of, dude, I'm really struggling here. Can't get these words out, man. Let's see here. So cost push inflation is the decrease in the aggregate supply of goods and services stemming from an increase in the cost of production. So the cost of production increases. Well, a profitable company is going to pass on those increased costs onto their customer, right? That's how business works. You got overhead expenses, cost of doing business, that gets added into the price of producing your product. And then on another level, you've got demand pull inflation, which is the increase in aggregate demand for a certain thing. And this is categorized by, they talk about the 4 sections of the macro economy. So they talk about individuals or households, businesses, governments, and foreign buyers. But then they talk about, let's see, where is it at here? Where it talks about the cost of raw materials, the cost of labor, the cost of capital. All of those things play into demand pull. So what we're seeing actually here in inflation today is demand pull, I believe. And that is where the supply of money is increased. There's more, which creates more demand in the market because everybody's got more money. And because there's more demand in the market, everything shoots up in price, as well as the other factor of the amount of dollars that you hold devalue or get debased as the total supply increases. It's wild stuff.
It's also really confusing. It's I think it's confusing because inflation in and of itself is like a really weird phenomenon, like that we think that we can get away with printing time. It's like such a weird thing. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But what about the kind of inflation, Nick, where it's like instead of 12 slices of bread in a package or in a loaf, now there's 11, but the price is the same? What is that kind of inflation called? Because I've seen that happen at my grocery store already, where it's like, oh, you guys like are keeping, because the price of like let's just say the price of a sirloin steak was $10 yesterday a pound, but it's still, the prices haven't changed much. Like it's still like $8 or whatever. They just don't put any meat in there, or they
Yeah.
slice it a little thinner. What is that
So
called?
they
Does
call
that,
it,
does that have a title?
there's one name that I'm seeing that's shrinkflation, which
Yes.
is you basically that you pay the same price that you're used to paying, but there's less in the package, or less in the box or whatever. So like, chips, you buy a bag of
Be
chips and it's like,
aware, everybody, that's happening.
oh yeah. So I mean, you buy a bag of chips, at one point in time, and it's a full bag of chips, and then inflation, shoots up and gets crazy, and you still pay the same for that same bag of chips, but there's less chips in the bag.
Yeah.
Shrinkflation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like we're gonna get, there'll be like one chip in the bag here soon.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So how do you think Bitcoin plays or is connected in this inflation deal?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, which is why I think there's like an unforeseen bubble within everything right now, because it's an inflation bubble. And, you know, I would like to believe Bitcoin is impervious to that, but I do think this inflation bubble, like, I guess, Nick, the question is, can our Federal Reserve / US government get this thing under control for real or not? Like, can they? Because if you think they can, then Bitcoin is just fine, because inflation is not transitory. So we're just going to be living in the world we're living in today. We're just going to have to find a way to do it, because you can't unprint the money. You can't, tell me the last time that your world truly got deflationary. The prices that we're seeing today are here to stay, and they're not really sustainable. So my question is, if you aren't on that side, what does an inflation bubble mean for investments when you hit the end of it and it pops? I don't really know what happens in the markets during those times. I can't imagine it's good. But also with Bitcoin, it's global. It's not even $1 trillion asset yet, and I think that means it's super undervalued. So I think it still has a run to go. But I don't know, I'm not like, this is not investment advice. I think Bitcoin is, without a doubt, potentially the only undervalued asset right now that there is. I think it's undervalued. I don't think 800 billion is enough. It's not even like a huge number when you look at other asset classes.
I'm
When you
trying to
look at gold,
find.
it makes you chuckle. So I'm just saying, it has a way. Bitcoin has another 20,000x in it if you want to look at it in USD terms over a period of time. But over the next, short period, or whatever this inflation bubble is, inflationary environment, I don't know. Anybody's guess is best guess. I just think that there's potential for Bitcoin to be good in an inflation recession, meaning your money is sound, because one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and I think it'll hold good purchasing power during that time. But I mean, I guess at the very end of the day, there could be money in Bitcoin that people just had extra money because it wasn't worth a lot, and so they were able to obtain a lot of it easy. It's easy money. I don't know, man. It's a really interesting thing. I don't really think we're going to go backwards, though. I think that the only way forward is continuing to QE, continuing to try to fan the flames of forest fire.
Let me pull this deal up here.
It's just a really hard
Let's
It's a
check this
really
out
hard
here.
thing to think about because there's really no examples in history where this ends up being any kind of good for us.
So I know, Griff, you are familiar with this website. It's called WTF Happened in
Mhm.
1971.com. It's just a website filled with charts here that show all of these different examples of what inflation has done over time. I mean, check this out. 1971 cost of living, new house, $25,000. Average income, $10,000. New car, $3,500. Gas, 40 cents a gallon. Movie ticket, $1.50. Look at some of those things. Here's an interesting one. Um, this is, I believe, an example of, Campbell's condensed tomato soup. So this is one of those standard products. They say it's tough to hide inflation with such a standard product like this. But from that point right there in 1971, that's pretty wild, huh?
These are Campbell's products.
Yeah, it was just a Campbell's, says condensed tomato soup.
This is the best website. I love it.
Here's a good one, right? Obviously, we can see from 1913 to 2015, these numbers are cumulative in that whole period of time is 2,300% inflation, which is absolutely absurd. But then we can see from that 1971 year, it shoots way up a lot quicker, which is wild. I mean, here you go. Here's the CPI that they've tracked since. I don't know. I don't know if they've. I don't know how accurate all of these numbers are in this period, but I mean, look at this. I mean, we don't even really need to say much, right?
So the real question is what is America's only way out of this problem?
Man, see, this is where things get interesting, right? Is because we could sit here and talk about the fundamentals of Bitcoin, and we could talk about the problems that we're facing within the current system. It does for sure start getting tough when we look into the future and think, okay, so we've got some issues. What is the way forward? What is the path forward? You know, obviously. So before we get there, so 1971, Richard Nixon officially takes us off the gold standard, gives the federal government all power to print all the money they want. That's why you're seeing those numbers that you see in that website. That's why the purchasing power of the dollar has gone so far down, so drastically, so quickly over a couple of decades. It's gone down pretty rapidly. And
Why
that is
other
because the
countries aren't
increased
even
supply of
holding it
money, right?
anymore is
Huh?
pretty obvious, you know.
Huh?
A lot of other countries aren't just holding US dollars anymore. They're like, this is not what we want.
Yeah.
It's not good.
So we think about, moving forward, like what does the future look like? I mean, I don't know what happens to the dollar. I think I was on a Twitter space the other day, and I was talking with a guy about this, and I think what he was saying makes a ton of sense. And what that was is that some of the larger fiats, which are the US dollar, the euro, all the larger ones will probably stick around for a while. They'll probably stick around for a while, and then they will over time hyperinflate themselves out of existence, right? And then I think there's going to be more of a move toward a harder form of money, whether that's, because some people are going to run to gold and precious metals. Some people are going to run to Bitcoin, right? I mean, obviously you and I know where we're going to go with our value, with our money. But, people are going to run to harder forms of, harder forms of money, or just reserve assets, right? Whether that's real estate, commodities, Bitcoin, gold, whatever it is. People are going to start running to those things whenever the mainstream catches on, right? Whenever the majority is like, oh, we've kind of got an issue here, right? It seems like this stuff is so new, and it's kind of difficult to understand. And if you're not interested in this stuff, you probably don't pay attention to it all the time, right? It's like all of the was that?
Isn't it crazy how many more people are now up in arms because inflation is so high? It's like you can't ignore it. But
Yeah.
like it's been really bad for quite some time. I just thought it was crazy because like there is this number out there, this magical number that it makes people realize, and they go, okay, this is not good. Like now people are starting to become a little bit conscious, and they're like, I wonder what's going on. And I think this conversation is interesting, Nick, because it's in the future, right? Because 75% of all fiat currencies in world history have gone to zero, and the only 25% remaining are the ones we see today. So what is the future of money now that Bitcoin is out there, now that the United States has decided to economically sanction entire countries, now that, you know what I'm saying? Like now that the game has changed, now that India bought oil from Russia in rubles, now that there is a world trade that isn't really running through the United States and NATO anymore. And I don't really think it's all that bad of a thing for people. Governments will do what governments will do, but maybe in the future, Bitcoin starts off as just like that medium that gets traded between countries, and you have NATO, you have the Eastern countries, and then you have the internet and Bitcoin, and like some smaller countries, I think, will choose to be like, okay, I'm going to be all in on Bitcoin because I can get these really smart developers, wealthy people to come to our country and build the infrastructure with Bitcoin. And that's fine. There might be some authoritarian small nations that don't like that at first, but their people are going to drive for this. And then there'll be the United States, because the United States, whether the United States is the world reserve currency or not, we still have a lot of huge companies. We still produce a lot of everything. We still have the world's strongest military. So don't think that we're like all of a sudden just going to crash and burn. I just think it means that, this is my kind of take, it's like you're going to have the United States dollar and the euro, maybe a yuan, and they're all going to back it with all kinds of different things. They're going to back it with oil. They're going to back it with Bitcoin. They're going to back it with gold. They're going to back it with all kinds of shit. But having the strongest currency, it's going to be like a battle. And the way to do that, in my opinion, is to make your money worth more. And hopefully this gets America, to go wake the fuck up and back their money with Bitcoin first. Buy as much of it as you can first. I mean, that's the game theory, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be because Bitcoin doesn't have to be that medium of exchange to start out. It doesn't have to be that medium of exchange like for everything to start out, but could be great collateral. Could think about this. Even if gold became the standard again, there'd be a lot more people mining that shit too, right? So would the price even really go up that much? Nah, maybe. With Bitcoin, how do you sell it? It's absolute scarcity. And governments will buy. I mean, like at some point they're going to go, fuck, I got to get a lot of this shit, because they can't have the more micro strategies, the more Duquans and USD stable coins and whatever that buy these large reserves of Bitcoin, the less the government's going to be able to have.
Yeah.
And that means the less power they'll be able to have around the whole world.
Well, I think it was Thursday, right, that the 19 millionth Bitcoin had been mined. There's a little under 2 to go at this point, right? And I'm not 100% sure on the numbers as far as percentage, but I got to imagine that a ton of the Bitcoin miners out there are selling their Bitcoin and running a profitable business with it. Now, there's plenty that are mining for themselves to hold.
I think
right?
they're all holding.
But think about like the larger outfits, right? The mega, what is it called? Marathon, and just those larger entities that have their full servers set up. They've got full facilities. Those guys are mining Bitcoin and selling as a profitable business, right? But again, there's only 21 million of these suckers, right? I mean, you've seen Terra, right?
Left.
Have you seen the stuff with Terra? I haven't really looked into that a ton.
What happened with ExxonMobil?
Yeah, I have seen that. I have seen
That's
ExxonMobil. They're now mining Bitcoin.
Yeah, set the price and think about that. They're setting all that up for only 2 more million. So you think that they think it's going to go up in price, and somebody there knows something. You got to follow the money with Bitcoin. it's pouring into the system. The network is growing so fast. I
Yeah.
mean, the moment, you know, Jack Mallers announced a partnership with Apple, I mean, like, then you can think of Bitcoin, think of it for an investment, think of it as a company. The network, it's just a company that's 100% worker owned. So the only way for you to get a good investment out of your Bitcoin, if you're somebody who's like all in, like Jack Mallers is like all in on it, is to make it truly great.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to work. That's why building something on Bitcoin, that's why all the applications that will come to it, all the innovation, all the cool stuff is so much better than all the other shit, because you have to build something for free to just make the network that much more valuable. You're basically making a company that you can never own more valuable. So you got to think of it as we're all workers for the Bitcoin network anyway. And if we're all workers for it, that means we all have equity if you own some of it. So, and you can buy as much equity as you can get your USD hands on, you know, like you can buy as much as you want right now. But you know when it's really, the price really going to go up, Nick? When all the miners and everybody go, yeah, we're not selling this shit anymore.
Yeah.
We're done. We're done.
Well,
We're not,
I've seen a lot of takes from Will Clemente and Dylan LeClaire talking about short term. I forget the terminologies that they use, but it's like short term holder cost basis has reversed and is now in the positive, meaning the people who have bought, you know, on a shorter timeline here recently are officially positive on their investment, which is obviously a good thing. But then they said, I think it's long and short-term holders that haven't moved their Bitcoin in X amount of time is at an all-time high. And the last time that it did this, that we had a similar situation as far as the analytics on the network go, was in September of 21, right before it did that big, huge rip. And so they said that there's like all this stuff that's gearing Bitcoin into a shoot up type of situation. But then there's also I've seen some talk on, I think it's short-term and long-term treasuries and their yields, and when they invert in some, I don't know exactly the deals. I probably shouldn't talk about it because I don't know a whole lot about what the deal is, but they invert their yield curves. And typically, I guess what has always happened in the past, or what has happened in the past a majority of the time, is that a recession follows. And I don't think that that's far off from the truth, right? I mean, if a recession starts here pretty quick, I think we'd all be like, yeah, I think we probably could have seen something like this coming. You know, I don't know how big or how bad or, you know, whatever, but I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we've been throwing money into the markets at this point for freaking years, and really screwing everything up and twisting everything up. You know, it's wild. So I was reading some stuff earlier this morning about, it was about when is inflation good for an economy? When is inflation good for an economy? And it was talking about, you know, it always talks about lost or unused labor and production in the economy. And so it was talking about, you know, if we stimulate the economy by printing more money, by adding more money into the total supply, it will stimulate more economic activity. It'll bring more people back to work. It's typically something that the federal government will do whenever we are at the bottom of a recession or a depression, whatever you want to look at. Whenever economic activity is really low, whenever we've got a lot of unemployment, you stimulate the economy with a bunch of money, and it gets things moving and moving and moving again. Well, now we're at a point where things have ran on red, right? We're running at 10,000 RPMs, and this thing's going too fast. Well, now they've got to tighten up the spending. They've got to tighten up the QE so that the economy can slow down and let some steam off, right? But it just seems like these guys can't quite let that happen, right? It's almost like Jerome Powell and his boys. They got too much ego involved, and they're like, they don't want there to be any type of downturn, right? Because they own all the assets at the end of the day, right? They own all this kind of stuff. They got tons of money, and in hard assets and equities and all this stuff. They don't want to take the dump either, right? Just like all the rest of us. But here's the wild part. You know, they talk about also inflation helps debtors, which it does, right? I mean, if you've got a fixed if you've got a fixed liability, call it a mortgage, right? And you pay $1,000 for your mortgage every month, and then the purchasing power of a dollar goes down, well, then that effectively means that you are going to be spending less money, less purchasing power to pay for that fixed liability than you would in the beginning, right? You talk about the increased supply of money devaluing what we hold. Well, that also devalues the debt that we have to pay out as well. If $1,000 today is worth less than $1,000 at some point in the future, well, then the $1,000 fixed outflow for a mortgage payment for a liability will also be worth less at sometime in the future, which is interesting, right? So you're like, okay, so this kind of can help people that are in debt. Okay, interesting, but typically the people that are at the middle income and below, right? They don't have a ton of assets that they're sitting on that are helping them hedge the risk, the criminal evil that inflation is, right? They don't have a bunch of cash that they're sitting on to help them in times of emergency, right? And even if they did, it would devalue, right? And so it's almost like the exact people that they're trying to help in this situation. We talk about you talk about high unemployment, you talk about people not being able to work, you talk about people not being able to pay for things, all the economic activity being at like level zero. We're going to print some money so we can stimulate economic activity, but then it devalues everything that person owns, right? It's like, guys, what are we doing? You know, this isn't how it works. And, you know, I think we may hit on it next week, but dude, again, the time value, or not time value, time preference of money, it plays a huge role in the society. You know, it's not just, we're not just talking about money, you know, it's not just money. It's not just an investment. It's not just economics. It's what does the future look like? What kind of life are we going to create for the generation behind us, right? What kind of world are we leaving for the next generation? You know, whenever money is not sound, and we have to think about right now today, because our dollars aren't going to be worth anything in the future. Well, that inherently leads us down a pretty strange path, right? Where all we do is think about today and myself, and we don't get to think about what's in the future and what are we leaving for the guys behind us, you know?
That was a good rant.
What do you think, Griff?
See, that was just like, I like that.
It's a wild world we're living in here.
Heater. I think it's one of those things too. I mean, like I find myself on heaters like you kind of just were there, like where you're just like, what the hell are we going to do? And why are these old people, for lack of a better phrase, why are these old people fucking us? What's the deal? Why are they not, like, are they missing what you just said? Because I feel like what you just said, like, how could you argue that? Like,
dude,
that's what I'm saying.
I don't know, man.
Like, how could that be argued?
Yeah, let's think about that. Let's do that. That'd be a fun experiment here. I mean, what is the person that's not a Bitcoiner, that believes that the dollar is going to be okay, and that the federal government is going to be able to get us out of this? I mean, what do they say? I mean, what is the point that goes against it?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. There's no argument. There's no argument to be made. They're screwed. They even know they're screwed. That's why they're considering Bitcoin. Because they're like, we're going to have to flip this thing on its head. But they're going to find out. I think the whole thing about Bitcoin is they might think they have a plan to control it, and you can't control it. But they just don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
You know, it really is wild. I was talking to a previous coworker whenever I was at Inspire. Met a guy that I was there with that is no longer there, and we were talking about the things that we had learned while we were in that industry, and he's still in the industry in some sense, little bit of a different gig that he's got now. But we were talking about, the 100 hours, right? You put 100 hours in, or whatever the exact number is, right? It depends on how able you are to grasp the ideas and all that kind of stuff. But either way, let's call it 100 hours. You put 100 hours into learning Bitcoin, and I'll tell you what, it's going to be really difficult to find answers that to the questions that we were just talking about how does this not work, right? Like, why not Bitcoin, right? What are the real reasons against Bitcoin? I'm hearing all this stuff about the environmental impact right now, dude. This is so dumb. So, you know what? Bitcoin consumes a shit ton of energy. 100%, it does. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. Bitcoin for sure consumes a ton of energy. Okay. So does that mean that it's inherently bad? I don't think so.
It consumes a ton of energy relative to what, though?
Exactly, right? Exactly.
We can produce more energy if we wanted to. We as people choose to take the worst ways of obtaining energy. We don't use nuclear, so we resort to wind and solar and oil. Well, and wind and solar is like,
you got to think about what is.
But the whole thing about Bitcoin is we're talking about non-renewables or renewables that are wasted. So wasted energy is cheap. So basically Bitcoin miners will flock to where wasted energy is, wasted renewables, wasted whatever, because it gets shot into the ground. And if it just gets wasted, it gets wasted. There's nothing you do with that energy. So Bitcoin has a huge incentive to operate cheaply and operate on wasted energy. And that only bolsters our energy grid, because now we're not even wasting any energy. It's really efficient, really. It just makes it much more efficient. And
it's interesting to think about, the energy that Bitcoin is consuming, because there are people that are connected into the regular grid, right? They're not capturing those special types of energy, on oil fields and things like that, or like the flaring that we've seen with midstream, not midstream, just oil producers, right? But anyways, you also got to think about, okay, well, why is Bitcoin consuming all this energy? And you and I both know that the Bitcoin mining process not only produces new Bitcoin, but it protects the network. The more hash power that goes into the mining process, the more protection, the more security the total network has. So we think, how much energy are we willing to expend on the protection and the soundness of our money? How much energy are we willing to expend to protect, keeping people out of a situation of poverty? How much are we willing to expend on protecting our property rights, right? How much energy are we willing to expend for that? Right now, we're looking at, go look at Jason Lowry. I listened to that interview that you were talking about, Griff, whenever he went on the Pomp Show. Really good, right? Where he talks about the knife and the gun. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Well, why? Because a gun has so much more energy that it can transmit to protect your property, right? Well, would you bring a gun to a tank fight? Well, no, because a tank has more energy. It requires and produces more energy, right? And the same is true. And then he also brings it back to, right, these things can be used to protect our property, right? You want to trust your neighbor. He talks about, you want to trust your neighbor, but just in case, I've got a gun so that if he comes over here and he tries to steal my stuff, I can protect myself, worst case scenario, right? Well, what if instead of having to kill each other and stab each other and shoot each other to protect our property, right, to protect our future, we talk about the time preference of our money. If money is not sound and it devalues over time, well, we don't save for the future. We don't think about the future. And if we're not thinking about the future, I can't imagine that creates the best future for the generations to follow, right? I think that we've got to value the future, because valuing the future allows us to operate intentionally today to create what we want to create in the future, and it allows us to have the future that we're creating today, right? If we don't have that, well, then everything falls apart, and we run into the moral issues that's going to cause. We run into a demoralization of society, right? All of these issues, right, that it's going to create down the line, and all the spinoffs from all the major things that it's going to create, dude, it's not good. And so the question is it really worth expending any energy to protect that? I think it's probably pretty important, right? So is there some environmental impact on the Bitcoin mining process? Yeah, I'm sure there is a little bit, right? I mean, we've got to produce miners, like miners have to be made, and that requires
That
raw
positive for the
materials.
environment, though.
Well, but again, it's like, how much are we willing to expend? I mean, I think that we should probably expend some amount of energy and some amount of
Well,
energy
yeah,
to
I get what you're
protect.
saying. Like, it's okay, even if it does impact the environment a little bit, it's still worth it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying that there's a world where it's maybe net positive for the environment, no longer net negative.
I mean,
And
yeah, that's the ideal, right? Looking into the
think about
future.
all the damn states with a bunch of wasted energy that could just go, hey, miners pretty much give you it for free.
Yeah.
Here, come get it. And now their energy grids are stronger as well, because
Yep.
inefficiency makes things weaker. You
Yep.
want things to be efficient, so you're just efficiently using all the energy within the entire country. And I mean, I only think that's going to make it better and better and better, because then if you want to create a green future, and this is why the green people should love it, if you want to try and skip it on nuclear power, well, you better have a bunch of Bitcoin miners attached to your solar panels and attached to your wind turbines, because you're going to have a lot of wasted energy.
Yep.
So you better just bring them along with it. So these environmentalists, I think, will come along, because the greenest technically form of energy would be wind and solar to a degree, if done right. Kind of. I'm not a huge fan,
Well, it's
but
like, how much
that's what they
does it
want.
cost to
Bitcoin's a good
produce those
spot.
things, What
Yeah,
is, like, what kind of metal do we use? What kind of composite materials do we use? What kind of,
right.
what does it take to create or produce or find or mine those materials, and how long do they last? Did you know that those huge wind turbines, right, with the huge I guess wings, I don't know what you call them. Those things don't last that long, and they've got like huge burial yards where they've just got these just rows of those things lined up because they don't last that long.
Mm.
I mean, what is the environmental impact of that, right? We talk about green energy, or I'm sure you've heard of the lithium ion, or I guess just lithium, that they have to mine to create these electric batteries. Okay, well, what's the environmental impact of all of that mining? It's a horrible process. It's not good. It really destroys everything that they get into, right? But again, it's like, okay, we're not just protecting money. We're not just protecting a couple of dollars in a wallet. We're protecting so much more than that. We're talking about the soundness of money, the future of culture, the future of people, the future of humanity, right? Um, people talk about switching from proof of work, which is the current mining system that Bitcoin operates on, that Ethereum operates on currently, that a lot of the major blockchains will operate on. They're wanting to switch over to a proof of stake system, which is what a lot of the shit coins operate on. There's no real work to be done. It's just whoever has the most amount of that currency gets to validate and verify the transactions, which that ain't good. That ain't good. I mean, that completely negates all of the properties of why Bitcoin is valuable. It's that it's decentralized. It's that there is nobody in control. The people at the
We
top
found a
don't
working
control
way to
everything.
do it. Yeah, it's like you found a working way to incentivize people to validate these transactions without trying to cheat the system, or just own more than somebody else, or make it political, or find a freebie. Proof of work. Not your keys, not your coins. It's a great system.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, bro. We're on the same page. Everybody
Yeah,
else, what's up with everybody else? I don't understand. Why is everybody? I feel like everybody just wants it. Everybody wants a 10x rather than just trusting what the true digital space is going to be. Is hopefully a Bitcoin world, but if not a Bitcoin world, we better buckle the fuck up. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be crazy.
um,
Imagine we're gonna be trading altcoins out there. Fine, fine. Give me my Dogecoin. I just don't think that's the future we see. I think that's just crazy.
yep,
But,
I agree, man.
and I guess I'm crazy because of Bitcoin, but I think people are crazier that believe in that. And if they do, and that's the world they're trying to build, I say good for them. They're going to run into a lot of regulatory problems. They're going to run into a lot of issues with their users. Um, and they're also going to run into a big problem just competing with Bitcoin, because for Bitcoin, all the developers, they'll just build everything for free. You're a company, just not, it's not going to be, it's not as powerful. It's not going to be as good. Just saying.
Yeah. Man, this inflation piece is pretty wild. I hope to God that it does not continue persisting the way that it has for the past several months. Hopefully we see things taper off a little bit. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what it looks like, but I mean, where we're at today is obviously a situation that we could end up again in the future. It could be significantly worse in the future. We could never see the dollar inflate again, but that's probably not going to happen, right? I mean, the chances of that are like 0. So I don't know. I don't know what the future looks like. To Griff's point earlier, 75% of all fiat currencies that were ever created failed, and the remaining 25% are right here today, what we've got now. And the system the system that we're operating under today has never worked. We're seeing we are literally seeing issues right now. I mean, dude, like we were on the website a second ago, and we saw the price of a home in 1971 was $25,000. Is that really how much a home actually costs to make? Do you think it really cost 25 grand? But things have just been so inflated that it now we have to expend more dollars to buy the same house.
I think the
Like,
question
what's the real
is,
cost?
I think the question there is like the lumber, in essence, to build this home. How much is the lumber inflated, and is lumber inflating because we don't have as much supply, so demand is outpacing supply, so the price is high, or where's this all the way messed up, right? Like in Northern California, we've had a lot more forest fires, but that's because back in like the 1960s, the government said lumber companies have to stop chopping down so many trees to protect the environment.
Mm-hmm.
But now, because there's no lumber companies monitoring the situation, making sure the debris is picked up, making sure the amount of trees are correct per acre or whatever, there's like 20 times as many trees. So a forest fire happens, and now we have these huge forest fires because there's just more trees, just because the regulation is wrong. They're just like, oh, do the green thing, do the right thing. Just doesn't make any sense.
Somehow or another, Elizabeth Warren would say that that's Bitcoin's fault, and we need to ban Bitcoin.
But that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is so for building these homes, is the cost of building a home, could it truly be 25 grand? I think potentially the world could get back to that point. Yes, I do, because I think a lot of those commodities used to build much of these things, they're not more expensive. We just aren't operating efficiently. And it doesn't matter what you want to build in a truly robust economy where, all 50 states are firing on all cylinders. What couldn't we do? What couldn't you have? What price couldn't we get it down to? How cheap could we make everything? I think pretty fucking cheap, Nick. But I would say I'd like to leave everybody with that today. I think the world can get that cheap again. But I do truly think the only way is through Bitcoin. And you either hop on or hop off of that. But, poor people, young people who don't have assets like Nick and me right here, you should be rooting for a Bitcoin standard. You should be buying some, because you can buy digital properties, the super mega store of value like a world's never seen before. And you get to participate in in a country, in a network, the Bitcoin country, the Bitcoin network, that you want to talk about no judgment. You want to talk about free. You want to talk about open source. You want to talk about permissionless. You want to talk about just living the life that you want to live and transacting with each other. Bitcoin basically gives you the ability to do that now. So if you're really a free thinker, free mind, love the people, you're for the people, by the people, it's really hard for you to argue against Bitcoin. But yeah, they still will, Nick. So we'll just keep on keeping on.
Yes, sir. Alrighty. This has been another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. We are happy to have you guys listening. Hit us on Twitter up here at Nyc and Griff Show. Come hit us on Twitter. We're always open to talk with people. We would love to have more guests on. We've got some new graphics here that I made, and they look sick. Super juiced about them. But yeah, come check out our Twitter. Shoot us some DMs. Shoot us questions. Shoot us your thoughts. Articles to read. Here's the gas prices I was talking about. Come hit us on Twitter. Let's talk. And we cannot wait to see you again here in the next episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Peace.